Thank you very much. So I understand we have one bylaw coming forward from Council Committee, which would serve as an addendum to the agenda before us tonight. And also, Ms. Williams, maybe you could explain one item that we are removing from the agenda.
Certainly, Mayor Clark. Under approval of the agenda, we're just going to include the addendum and just ask Council to withdraw report item 2 on the agenda. There was no Budget Committee report resulting from the meeting earlier this afternoon.
Indeed, thank you. That was deferred. The decision on that was deferred to after our strategic planning process, which will take place in a fulsome way in a couple of weeks. So thank you for that. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor Ainsworth, second by Councillor Campbell. Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Based on the agenda and reports that you have read, is there anybody that needs to declare a conflict? Councillor Follis, we'll start with you.
So I'm declaring a conflict of interest on bylaw 2019-84, and it's because I teach at Georgian College. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And if you would so articulate that with ink on your paper, and you've already done that. Thank you. And Councillor Iman.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. If I may first say welcome back from your pilgrimage, and we all are looking forward to the story that you have to tell. I'm sure it'll be a very meaningful one. With respect to conflicts, I will be declaring conflict on the report, which is now number 2, was number 3, which is the report of the Common Elements Condominium Working Group, as I and my wife are owners of a condominium, which through part of our condominium fee, we are covering the common elements of that facility.
Thank you very much.
And I have documented that for staff.
You've documented, thank you. And thank you for that. Welcome back, Councillor Iman. For those who don't know, especially thinking about it during that moment of reflection, I just got back from a Holocaust tour in Berlin and Krakow, Poland, and in Israel, and it was just got back the night before last, and it was a horrifically fascinating experience, and I will see if it's appropriate that I do a presentation maybe to council in the fall sometime. Councillor Spola, related.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for what I'm about to say, but we'd like to welcome you back and wish you a happy 60th birthday. It hasn't been announced at council, so happy birthday on behalf of the citizens of Orillia.
Well, you're very kind.
We can sing happy birthday to you if you like.
Well, that's okay. I was truly hoping that there was one person on one corner of this planet was unaware of my age, but that now you've now closed that door. So thank you, Councillor Sapola. I will seek revenge in a very meaningful way. We have no presentations or deputations that I'm aware of, but on June 24th at our regular council meeting, we did conduct business. If somebody would be so kind as to make a motion to accept those minutes. Moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Follis. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We do have one correspondence item, and I have a motion, Ms. Williams, that I will suggest from the chair after having conversations with a couple of members of council. So this is with respect to the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness, or SCADA, Orillia chapter preparing for the 2020 homeless enumeration request and for council for participation. So do you speak to this now, or can I make my suggestion now, or whichever you prefer, Ms. Williams?
Mayor Clark, if this is your motion, certainly then you can speak to it now.
So we have a number of people around the council table that are quite interested in some of our social issues, our social economic issues. This is certainly one of them. And it's unfortunate some people live in this situation, and I'm familiar with, very close to one member of my family who is involved in this right now by actually taking somebody in. Having said that, I heard from Councillor Follis that he was interested in maybe fulfilling the request from SCADA, and I heard from Councillor Heen on that. So what I'd like to suggest, Councillor He was involved last year, so I would like to suggest that maybe she co-chairs it, but I would also love to have Councillor Follis involved, if that's okay. So if you wouldn't mind doing a motion to reflect that, assuming that SCADA would be happy to have them both involved in it, because I would think and hope that they would. Is there a seconder? Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Iman. I'm in the chair. Thank you, Councillor Ainsworth. Okay. Okay. So moved by Councillor Ainsworth, seconded by Councillor Iman, that further to the request of the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness, SCADA, Orillia chapter, which Councillor Lauer is also very involved with. In a letter received July 5th, 2019, Councillors Heen and Follis be appointed as council representatives on the SCADA 2020 Homelessness Enumeration Planning Committee. And this particular initiative actually has volunteers and members of council last year and obviously this year, and more of us may join them beyond the names that have been mentioned. And we actually go around and to the places where people are living on the streets or homeless, and it's funny how they're able to hide, sometimes in full view. And sometimes not in full view, but and I know it was very meaningful for a few members of council last year. So that's essentially what this is to help provide some data and some resulting direction to help take care of these folks. Is there any further discussion on that motion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. That is our correspondence item for this evening. Just for the folks here and at home, because I know there are millions that watch at home. Well, there aren't millions, but it does surprise me the number that do watch on a weekly basis. We have two categories, especially at council, that cover a number of items on the agenda. The bulk of the items were dealt with at council committee, in this case, this previous Monday, and then they're brought forward for ratification. So the discussion, the introduction, and debate have already happened on these items. So there are a number of them under the reports, and there's another number of them under consent agenda. So if you are interested, because we don't break them down individually unless they're pulled for a change of direction or for discussion. But if you are interested in those items, they're always available on our website. And if you wish paper form, you can get them on the first floor from the wonderful Julia at reception. So, Ms. Williams, are you aware of any items being pulled for a change of direction?
Yes, Mayor Clark. At this time, I'm aware of Councillor Follis is looking to pull Clause 8 of the Council Committee report. That is with respect to the installation of solar panels. He's looking, at the Recreation Centre, and he's looking for a proposed change in direction.
Thank you very much. Yes, there's been some discussions on this item. I think we should pull it for a change of direction, but we'll deal with that particular direction in a few moments. So if I could entertain a motion to capture the rest of the items on the reports, moved by Councillor Ainsworth, seconded by Councillor Heen. I'll wait for that to hit my desk, and then I will read the motion. Moved by Councillor Ainsworth and seconded by Councillor Heen that report number 2019-8 of Council Committee, now before Council, be adopted with the exception of Clause 8, which shall be introduced separately. Are there any further discussions on all the report clauses in report number 1, with the exception of number 8? I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And now, from the chair, I'm going to suggest a deferral of item number 8 until after we've had our strategic planning. But I can leave my chair and speak to it in Councillor Cluse's chair, or if Council wishes, or I can stay here and do that, whatever you prefer. We're okay? All right, thank you. So, many in the audience may be aware that Council has undertaken a number of items, initiatives to help combat climate change, which is a growing issue around the world. And I saw it elsewhere in the last couple of weeks, but certainly in Canada, certainly even in this area. And I won't get into the minutia right now, but we have a wonderful group in our community, and some of the people here tonight are involved in that. And that's a community solar panel project proposed for our recreation center on the gymnasium roof. It's about 11,000 square foot proposal on the roof, and the roof has been reinforced to accommodate solar panels. And I believe there is likely support to move this ahead tonight. That is my belief. But as we discussed this afternoon at the Budget Committee, that some of the decisions that we're going to make really need to be informed by a consensus of council direction. And we're undertaking a process that council hasn't done in a number of years, and that's a strategic planning process, which will begin in earnest in a couple of weeks. So what I would ask my council colleagues, there's a number of things that are going on. The community group has brought this forward and now formed with the Sustainable Orillia Task Force, which is doing some wonderful work in the community and are soon to bring forward something called 50 Shades of Green. 50 Shades of Green. I'm glad you inserted laughter at the appropriate spots. And council recently joined the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, with respect to their partners in combating climate change. The council, I think, also is looking for ways to demonstrate our support of combating climate change, and I think we're going to have that opportunity potentially through this project. There's a few things we need to work through, and of course, enshrine that kind of direction in a strategic planning process. So, if my colleagues will indulge me, I would like to suggest that we defer this particular motion until after we've had our strategic planning consultations, and then bring it back in August for direction. But I will entertain discussion on the original motion as it was enshrined at Council Committee. Is there a mover and a seconder? Ms. Williams, maybe if indeed that's where Council ends up wanting to go and to defer this, can you explain to me what would happen with this motion?
Certainly, Mayor Clark. This clause regarding the solar panels was brought forward from Council Committee, and so it does need to be placed on the floor. And at that time, if a member wishes to move that be postponed to a future date, that motion can be moved and seconded and decided upon by Council.
That clarification. So what I would ask, I would like a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Eamon, and thank you, Councillor Heen. I'll wait for that to hit my desk, and I'll read the motion. Moved by Councillor Eamon and seconded by Councillor Heen that Clause 8 of Report Number 2019-8 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted. Any discussion on that motion? Councillor Spola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a really important issue to all of us from an environmental standpoint and from an energy standpoint. We have the Sustainable Orillia group that has come to us many times. I have just a quote that one of my family members gave me. We have one planet to support us forever, and we better take care of it. And I think this is the start. The solar panels are a way of us saving energy and protecting the environment from harm. So I would prefer for us to take action, but I will support the motion at this time. And but I would like, when we discuss this, that there's a time on it when we can do this. And I have a question, and maybe you can answer it, is how long would it take to install once the rec center is open, was it a week, 2 weeks if we decide after it's open?
So the question or the answer, as always, the older I get, the more I realize things are not black and white. They're a little more shades of gray. And I think I stole that from a Monkey song.
You've been watching too many movies.
Yeah, but the answer as simply is this wonderful group is looking for council to support, as you well know, to the tune of about $30,000 a year, money that potentially could be redirected from rent that we receive from other solar panel projects, somewhat related, somewhat not related. But they are willing to go out into the community and raise essentially, I believe, 70% of the money for phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So I would suggest once council gives blessing to whatever that relationship is, they will begin in earnest to go out and raise the money. And once they raise the money, we will potentially contribute what we have put aside, and that will go ahead. So the actual installation time, I would suggest, I would like to see it phase 1 happen in 2020. The recreation center isn't going to open up until very late this year. So I hope that gives a little bit of clarity.
Yeah, thank you. I would prefer if it's installed before we open, but obviously we don't have the money to do that. So I will support the motion that you're requesting.
Thank you, Councillor Spola. Councillor Iman.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I would like to move a postponement until the August council cycle.
Thank you, Councillor Iman. Thank you, Councillor Spola. Any further discussion on the original motion? Okay, in that case, I will, with the motion to postpone this till August council, I will, any further discussion on the deferral? Councillor Fallis.
I just want to confirm that we're voting on the motion to defer first.
What we're going to do is the motion that's on my desk right now that I've read, we will put that in abeyance until until August, if indeed the deferral motion goes through. Seeing no other hands in the air, I will call the motion to postpone this until the August council meeting. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Williams, report number 2. That's the one that we have put that in abeyance as well, pending our strategic planning meetings. So right now, I would welcome Mr. McLagan, who is beginning to wear out the carpet in the City Hall with respect to the Common Elements Condominiums Working Group. And you're welcome to the stage, and we'll trade places. We'll trade Councillor Eamon for Mr. McLagan. I was going to explain to you where to go, but I know you know the way. Take your time to get set, but whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for welcoming me back for I don't know how many times now, Your Worship. And I also would like to thank all of those in the audience that have come tonight from the various common element condominiums to hear this presentation. Your Worship, Mayor Clark, members of council, and staff. Further to the establishment of the Common Element Condominium Working Group following my October 1st, 2018 deputation, our request for an expanded mandate is due to the apparent misinterpretation of the mandate relating to only taxation issues. As stated in the deputation, we recognized long ago that the city does not have the authority to adjust the taxation rates for common element condominium unit owners to compensate for the fact we do not receive full municipal services. Commencing on April 17th, the working group held several meetings to discuss the concerns of nearly 600 CEC units currently occupied in the city. We were limited in our ability to fully explore the cost and other implications of the city assuming full responsibility for the private roadways and underground infrastructure that comprise the major common elements within CEC developments. These common elements are also contained within some standard plan condominiums built horizontally rather than vertically, such as Brewery Lane that was constructed in 1984, way back. We now understand the use of the word private with respect to the roadways and underground infrastructure is contained in the development agreements between the city and the developers. Designating roadways and infrastructure within a CEC community as private enables the city to withhold full municipal services to common element condominiums and some horizontally built standard condominiums. This despite the fact CEC owners pay full municipal property taxes comparable to other homes of equal impact assessed value. Sorry on the paper here. We believe this to be inequitable, unfair, and morally wrong. The use of the CEC concept forces the establishment of CEC condo corporations with additional costs to unit owners in terms of maintenance fees to cover a number of items, including property management, insurance, reserve fund studies, performance audits, street lights, road surfacing, snow clearing, etc. These additional costs do not apply in a standard subdivision. The primary consideration is not just costs, it's about equity. CEC unit owners are paying full municipal taxes based on the full assessed market value at the same mill rate for all other properties in the residential class, but CEC equity is limited. The CE condo corporations owns the streetlights, sewers, fire hydrants, water services, and sidewalks. Literally everything other than the home and the land it sits on. It's discriminatory. Any knowing purchaser will give it the smell test and will say, that's just not right. The CEC model has created a situation where in 20 to 30 years, homeowners in these communities will be faced with some degree of failing infrastructure, such as water mains breaking, sinkholes, asphalt replacement, etc. The potential for bankruptcy of these corporations is extremely high because a single condo corporation cannot absorb these costs on its own. It's very unlikely that a condo corp reserve funds will have accumulated sufficient assets to survive a major financial infrastructure replacement or repairs. Municipalities should be committed to creating a model whereby condo corps are able to sustain themselves in the long term, which would mean the municipality assuming at a minimum the underground infrastructure and roadways. We are therefore requesting Council to expand our mandate to enable the CEC working group and the required city staff to provide Council with a comprehensive report regarding the costs and logistics of the city assuming full responsibility for the specified infrastructure and services. We do not believe an equitable resolution to the concerns of CEC and horizontally built standard condominiums can be resolved without the necessary study and ultimate report to Council. We would be pleased to respond to any questions you may have. And we have copies of those notes to be distributed along.
Thank you very much, Ms. McCloggin. Maybe Ms. Williams can grab those. Thank you, Ms. Williams. I'll open the floor for comments or questions. Councillor Follis.
Thanks. Through the chair, I was curious. I was just reading through the list A to G, and I know during the campaign, one other thing came up, and I wondered if it had been considered by the working group was animal control. Was that a consideration at any point?
Not to my recollection whatsoever, no.
is there the flexibility going forward to
If
discuss
it's
that?
applicable, and certainly, we would look at anything.
Okay, sure, yeah, just passing it along, I guess.
No, we appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Follis. Further questions, comments? Councillor Lauer.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I'm not sure if we've got a motion prepared.
Through you, Mayor Clark, perhaps Councillor Lauer can elaborate. We do have a few options prepared.
Okay. So, first of all, thanks, Scott, for your presentation once again. Mason, Councillor Ainsworth, and I have had the pleasure of working on this committee, and it's been a good committee with a lot of input, a lot of discussion, and I've learned an awful lot about condominiums and things I never knew before. What's being asked here is, first of all, to expand the mandate so that we can look at some, as Mr. McLagan is saying, some sort of transfer of responsibilities. There's also 3 other clauses that are less impactful, but are still, I think, deserving of some explanation. I would like to put forward a motion that this report be forwarded to staff to report back on us exactly what's involved with the entire process and some of the implications of clauses 2, 3, and 4 as well. So if you have that, we could put it up on the board.
It appears that it may be on the screen before us. Is there a, Councillor Lauer, do you have a mover and a seconder?
I'll certainly be the mover.
Okay, sounds like the 2 participants in the working group are the mover and the seconder. Councillor Lauer moving, Councillor Ainsworth seconding. I'll wait till it hits my desk before I read it. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Moved by Councillor Lauer, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth, that the report number CEC WG 1901, dated July 3rd, 2019, from the Common Elements Condominium Working Group regarding a request for mandate expansion be referred to the Development Services and Engineering Department for report back to Council on the options contained therein. Is there any further discussion by members of Council on this? Councillor Ainsworth.
Yes, through you, Mayor Clark. First of all, Scott, thank you so much for coming in. Definitely appreciate having you here. And it's always exciting that you get so many people together. I love it when people are in the council chambers. It's always exciting to see people get engaged in their democracy.
Doesn't feel quite so lonely, does it?
No, and it's usually pretty lonely up here. But the big thing is I'll be supporting this motion moving forward. I think there's a lot of information that's held within the motion. And I think it's important that we get staff's perspective on it. For example, if you're talking about things like taking over infrastructure, those are potentially some pretty mega bucks down the road for the city. So it's important that we make sure we flesh out the details on that before we decide to move forward, because when we get the information, we might decide to do it, might decide not to, we might decide to take some of those clauses and maybe not, but it's good that we have the hard information in front of us from staff to make those decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsworth. Councillor Cipolla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our guest. The streets, the width of the streets and everything else, is it the same as what we have? And I'm sorry, I should have talked to staff on this. Are they the same as what the city streets are, the 66 feet, or are they narrower?
No, in the common element condominiums, they have used a 9-meter or 20-foot wide road surface. And that is what has allowed the city to say, well, it's below our standard, and then to deny services. However, if you look at the, got a reference here, if I can pull it up for a second. There is the building code that allows the roads to be 9 meters as long as they're for public use and will accommodate a fire truck. Ours in North Lake Village certainly do, garbage trucks, cement mixers, everything that shouldn't be going through it to the new development at the north end of the property. The city sets the standards for the road width and the construction of the physical road. To our understanding, our roads, at least in North Lake, have been built to the same standard as the normal standard subdivision, which would be a 20-meter wide road.
Supplementary.
Councillor Sepola, so I just want to remind folks, I did ask for questions and comments for our guest, and then I went on to, when there were no more, I asked for the motion, so now we're having a debate amongst council members.
sorry.
No, you were asked, that's okay.
Oh, sorry, I just need, okay. To our CAO, does MPAC assess condominiums differently than they do, say, my house?
No. Sorry.
You're very eager, Mr. McLeod.
Well,
True.
just been at it too long, Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly MPAC, what MPAC will look at is essentially the value of the property. I do not believe that there is any different methodology for the condominiums.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments based on the proposed resolution before you? Okay, I will now call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We look forward to a subsequent report, and thank you, Mr. McLagan. And now, Mr. McLagan, with all, if it's okay with you, I'm going to trade you back to the audience and bring back Mr.
Thank you.
Councilor. You don't have to leave. This is where it gets really exciting. Yeah, there's cake. Thank you. Now, Ms. Williams, is there a proposed motion based on FCM and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference that Councillor Follis attended? I see it on the screen before me. Is there a mover and a shaker for that? Moved by Councillor Ainsworth, seconded by Councillor Heen. And any further discussion? Councillor Follis, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, just a brief statement. Was fortunate enough to attend the FCM conference in Quebec City, and it was a really valuable experience. Attended a couple different conferences that are, a couple different meetings that are listed there, and was able to create some really great, find some really great opportunities and meet some really interesting people. The one thing I really wanted to emphasize, next year's FCM conference is going to be held in Toronto, and I think certainly the city of Orillia would benefit from having a strong representation there. So I'm certainly planning on attending again, and I would definitely encourage colleagues to join me as well. And yeah, we'll have some fun in Toronto, I guess. Thanks.
While we're learning, I'm sure. Councillor Ainsworth.
Yes, through Mayor Clark, I just wanted to thank Councillor Falls for a thorough report. It was really interesting to see what was going on, specifically the links, so you could actually watch some of the speeches. I thought that was phenomenal. It's nice that technology can help us out with that. And I definitely agree with him when it comes to budget time. I know I will be lobbying for an FCM membership for the city of Orillia. I don't think it's quite fair that we receive all this funding from them, but yet we're not a part of the FCM. And especially when we want to have representation around the table, it's important that we do get involved with that and make sure we have our membership up to date.
Thank you very much, Councillor Follis. Councillor Lauer.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Just to reiterate, it's a good report, very interesting. I'm impressed by the slate of speakers. I mean, that's probably as good as it gets in an election year. But the one name that jumped out at me, and I say this just for a little trivia, is Jen Vasic, who is Andy Charter's daughter-in-law, which somehow Jay ran into, and she's a brand new councillor down in the city of Waterloo. So, anyway, good report.
Thank you. Further questions, comments? Councillor Follis?
Just a rebuttal. I was going to say, yeah, it was very funny.
There's nothing to...
I was just going to say, yeah, I was actually talking with her a bit about her experience, and the topic came up that she knew Anderson and it was really funny. So actually, I met her not knowing the connection, and we figured it out on the spot. So yeah, kind of an interesting one for sure.
That's great. So thank you, Councillor Follis. And without seeing any more hands in the air, I will now call the question. I will now read the question. Moved by Councillor Rains, second by Councillor Heen. That report number MC 1907 dated July 8, 2019 from Councillor Follis regarding the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and FCM conference held from May 30th to June 2nd, 2019 be received as the information, Any further questions, comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We're now into the motion part of our agenda, and this is from a deferred motion from the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit. There's the proposed motion on the screen before us that essentially be received as information. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Ainsworth, seconded by Councillor Campbell. I'll wait for that to hit my desk softly. Yes. Moved by Councillor Ainsworth, seconded by Councillor Campbell, that Clause 4 of Report Number 2019 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted. Is there any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We now have another deferred motion or postponed motion from June 24th with respect to the proposed VAT, which is the visitor's accommodation tax. And I think we're about to welcome our manager, Mr. Lasser. Is he introducing this or no? Madam CEO?
Three, Mr. Mayor, if members of council have questions for staff, certainly he will come forward. If you do not, then...
That's fine. Thank you. You just walked in as the thing I thought it was like set up. Anyway, so the motion is before you. Is there a mover and a seconder for this motion? Moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Follis. So moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Follis, encapsulating what you see on the screen before you, that Clause 2 of Report Number 2019-7 of Council Committee, now before Council be adopted. Any further discussion, comments, questions? Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Lauer, and then did I see Councillor Follis?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Just a question through you, perhaps to Michael.
Monsieur Ladisser.
You can just listen on the way up.
Yeah. If you're going to go to trouble putting a jacket and a tie on, we're going to bring you up on the platform.
So the motion states that the municipal accommodation tax would apply on all Orillia transient accommodations. Would that include Airbnbs and that type of thing?
Ms. Ruff, Ms. Ladis.
Through Mr. Chair, yes, we'd be able to, we can look at working directly with Airbnb, the platform itself, and something similar that the City of Barrie has done recently, where you're working with the actual platform, not the property owners.
Thank you. If I can, just follow that up. I just think it's really important that we have a level playing field across the board. Thanks.
Yeah, my understanding is that Airbnb is quite used to this in other jurisdictions, including Barrie, as Mr. Ladisser has said. So, a good question. Councillor Lauer.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I received the CIP, and I understand the intent of the folks representing different municipalities or townships. Just to remind everybody, we received a CIP stating that they had floated the idea of changing to, I was going to say Lower Lakeland, Orillia Lakeland, Orillia Lake Country, sorry. The members felt that they needed to refer back to their home bodies, which makes infinite sense. The problem I have with this, I still do not like the idea of not changing over the name for this kind of investment. And I'm wondering if there's a possibility to make this a one-year agreement and allow that process to take place and the full discussion before we attach ourselves for any length of time.
Thank you, Councillor Lauer. So I think you understand the question, Ms. Ruff and Mr. Ladouceur. My question by extension would be if indeed we are proposing that Orillia play a more prominent role in the moniker and we aren't able to resolve that issue and we do decide to go in the direction of establishing an MA, I can't remember, sorry, Ms. Ruff?
To you, Mr. Mayor, Municipal Service Corporation.
Municipal Service Corporation. My guess is that the discussions that we're going to have, and it sounds like they're willing to have those discussions, and we'll have those with other municipalities or our partners. If that goes forward, great, and if we can't come to an amenable agreement, then we would consider the municipal association that you mentioned. Would a year from now give us time to even go through that process? By extension of Councillor Lauer's comments.
Through Mr. Chair, in terms of setting up an MSC, a year would be enough time to go through the public process. However, in terms of probably evaluating the success of the MAT, the 1 year might be very limited in terms by the time you spend a year collecting all the dollars, it'll take the first year to collect the full amount. So to fully utilize the first year dollars, it'd be hard to evaluate the success and the deliverables of what that agreement would put out forth with the OLC.
Thank you very much. Councillor Follis.
Thanks. Through the chair, I guess this is kind of like a request wrapped in a question, but is any of this funding being planned for bringing just awareness, attention to local tourism entities within our community? So ones that Orillia owns, such as like the Leacock Museum or the Opera House, is there anything specific detailed? I was just curious if you might be able to speak to that. Thanks, Michael.
Through Mr. Chair, so yes, if the tourist entity, so if it's OLC, there would be an agreement put in place between the City of Orillia and the entity, outlining how we'd like to see some of the dollars spent, with the emphasis on Orillia assets and packaging around those Orillia assets. And then in addition to that, there is that 50% that the city retains, and council would be given a report back on how those dollars would be spent as well.
Thank you. Yes, I actually thought it was a very good report. Councillor Spola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be happy to second Councillor Lauer's idea or motion, if he would like to put it in a motion, to only go for 1 year contract or 1 year rather than 3. I still don't like the idea of being called other than Orillia. I think it's really important because Orillia is the headquarters of the surrounding areas and everything else. People come to Orillia, they know it, where very few people know Lake Country. Could be Peterborough, could be North Bay, could be us as well. So I'm wondering if Councillor Lauer would be agreeable to a motion, to amend the motion to have it just for 1 year contract.
Okay, a couple of things here. One is I have Councillor Heen and Councillor Iman in queue. Councillor Iman, I think, on that specific point. But I did think we did hear from Mr. Ladouceur, it's a French name. When you spend 12 days in 3 different countries, you try to adapt. Address Councillor Lauer's suggestion of a year, and I'm hearing that it might be too short a period of time. So I might, maybe from Mr. Ladouceur, could shed a light on a suggestion of time that would satisfy what I'm hearing from Councillor Lauer and Councillor Spola, and yet allow enough time to establish an MSC if necessary, and analyze the results of a period of time.
Through Mr. Chair, based off the discussion at the OLC board, the municipal representatives there are all open to the idea of working together to find a common goal. The 3 years have been proposed to be able to effectively evaluate the application of the MAT, as well as working through with all the municipal partners in terms of coming up with the proper name to be able to really showcase the area. All the partners at the table really strongly feel that there's value in working together, sharing each other resources in terms of properties as well. So the 3 years will allow that ability to collect the dollars, assess the dollars, really evaluate everything, and within that clause, you can put in items in the clause in terms of working towards a different name, as well as some outs if council really do desire. But the 3 years really would be able to evaluate the success of the MAT effectively and improperly.
And this coming from those who would help deliver those services within our city, should it come to that. So I appreciate that comment, Madam CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as staff have indicated, certainly they're going to continue that conversation at the Lake Country Board table in terms of the name. The one thing that potentially could be considered, and if I can, through you, Mr. Mayor, just to staff, is it possible to put a 3 to 6 month termination clause in the agreement that if we decide to head in an alternative direction, maybe after year 2, then appropriate notice could be given and we could head towards the Municipal Service Corporation. So if I can just get clarification as to whether that would cause any challenges if in fact we put a termination clause in the agreement.
Through Mr. Chair, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be something possible, especially with the other municipalities at the table also looking at different mats. There may be something similar to that for other municipalities investing in OLC as well. So I think it would be smart to be able to put in that 3 to 6 month clause to be able to give us enough time to be able to pursue the public consultation forums for an MSC.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Heenan and Councillor Iman, but I just want to remind the folks around the table that we read in the CIP that the Lake Country Board is quite willing to have those conversations. They just want to do due diligence and have those discussions with their other partners who are also our partners in the city, not just in tourism or marketing delivery, but in other issues as well. So I think I just want to make sure that we're being respectful of those relationships. Councillor Heenan.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Actually, Michael just answered my question. Mine was going to be, what did you feel was an appropriate length of time for the contract to be? So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heenan. Councillor Iman.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. My point was exactly the same as our CAO, that I'd prefer a termination or a notice of termination clause rather than put a finite end on it. And it shows our commitment to a higher degree. And I'm also of the belief that the Lake Country Group is having to invest in the exercise of collecting this, and if they felt it was only for a year, they might say it's not worth the effort. So,
fair enough. Good point. Okay, seeing no other. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lauer.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Just to clarify what I was looking for, I'm not looking for a report on the whole program. I was just simply wanting to allow a reasonable amount of time for the other partners to go back to their councils or whatever and get the kind of feedback that they seem to want before they make any decision. But failing that, I don't want to get into a 3-year contract. So if we do it with a termination clause that we can get out of it in 6 months at any time, then that's fine with me. It's the same thing. I think it's actually even more cutthroat than saying, here, you got a year to sort this out. But either way, I just do not want to be tied into this for 3 years because I'd like to, if we're going to go our own way, I would like this council to make that decision. And so
I think based on the comments I've heard around the table and a suggestion from staff, that maybe we can entertain this clause, Ms. Williams, with adding an additional clause, which I assume will be an amendment to this, that would maybe afford the city a 6-month termination clause, which I think is relatively standard in a number of contracts. I'm going to guess that was moved and seconded by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Cipolla. If it's okay, Councillor Lauer, I'd like to read the amendment and then go right to you. If that's okay. Well, Councillor Lauer appears as though we have a little bit of dead time, so go right ahead.
Go ahead. Just to clarify and make it perfectly clear that I have no problem with the idea of regional tourism. Certainly the city of Orillia benefits from a lot of the attractions and facilities in the surrounding area, so that isn't the problem. I honestly believe that geographically identifying this location with the name Orillia does wonders for the name as opposed to Ontario. Right now, I believe we're promoting Ontario, but we can be much more specific and much more effective.
Great, thank you. Ms. Williams? So I have an amendment to the main motion moved by Councillor Emon, seconded by Councillor Cipolla. The motion now before Council be amended by adding the following. With the exception that the following be added at the end of the third paragraph, with the agreement to include a termination clause. What I did ask for was a termination clause of 6 months, not 3 to 6 months. So either I need an explanation on that or I'll amend it to read the 6 months. Councillor Emon.
Mayor Clark, typically I believe those clauses are on a 6 months notice or 3 month notice of termination, so that you can't have both. I mean, it's either or. That would be my sense. And so it's a pick a time, and that amount is the amount of time we give notice that we're terminating in 6 months. If that's enough time to set up our own administrative thing, then fine. If 3 months is, then 3 is. But they also have the right to terminate.
Generally, that's right.
It's a reciprocal right. Yep. But it's the notice, a notice of termination.
So the discussion I did here was 6 months. I thought that was coming to me. If it's acceptable, I will scratch out the number 3 and the word 2.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it was just sort of set up like that just so that staff had the ability, if it worked for the organization 3 months, then 3 months would work. And if 6 months worked for them, then that would work as well. So it gave staff sort of that flexibility of working through either the 3 or 6 months. So, but if council believes that 6 months is the an appropriate time frame, then you just want to remove the 3 and the 2.
I mean, I won't weigh into the debate, although by my following comment I will, I guess. I would just like to be as respectful as possible and yet accomplish the goal that we have, and that's why I thought 6 months is what I heard and what made sense. But Councillor Emon, you're the mover of this motion, so I'll let you speak to that.
Mayor Clark, if the motion is purely giving staff flexibility to negotiate, then it's fine. I'm quite comfortable with the way it is. Okay. If we are delineating a desired state, then it needs to be a little more precise. I'm comfortable with giving staff direction to negotiate.
Okay. And Councillor Cipolla, you are as a seconder? Okay, then we'll leave it as it is. And is there any further discussion, questions, comments? I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Back to the main motion. Anybody like it reread? Any further questions, comments? I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. I did. This is the motion. The motion is simply moved by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Follis, that Clause 2 of Report Number 2019-7 of Council committee now before Council be adopted. That encapsulates every as amended, indeed. As amended. You're right. And I did call the question, and I saw almost unanimity. So I will, unless somebody wants me to reread it with as amended, I will leave it as is. Thank you. Okay, number 3, the motion before us there, so mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Cloustra, seconded by Councillor Campbell. Moved by Councillor Cloustra, seconded by Councillor Campbell, that Clause 3 of Report Number 2019-7 of Council Committee now before Council be adopted. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? Councillor Lauer.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. This was a report that I asked to be delayed for a month, or no, whatever it's been, 3 weeks, so that I could do a little bit more research into this. I did get together with Andrew Shell and got a wonderful tour of all the backflow apparatus in their building down there. It was truly exciting. The issue had to do with inspections and how often these inspections occurred. And some folks felt, Ralph, I guess you got a few calls on this as well, that the inspection schedule was a bit tight and that they didn't feel they should have to do it every year. So on, so it is quite expensive. It can range up to $150, $250 for a check. So what I was looking into was the idea of a delay, and maybe not a delay of changing that schedule, that maybe they could do it every couple of years. However, Andrew did some research into the actual equipment, and what happens is the equipment is only guaranteed as long as it's inspected every year. So if the city doesn't inspect it and it fails, then number one, we open ourselves up to some liability and other things. So just going to let this one pass. Andrew and his department are looking into ways of maybe helping people find the best possible deal they can get on the inspections.
Thank you, Councillor Lauer. Any further questions, comments? I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. The notice of motion section and the report on the screen before us is a reconsideration motion to allow council to reconsider the motion, which is number 1, and I believe the only item under notice of the motion. So I'll read this question, just a reminder that this cannot be debated. And we'll look for potentially 2/3 of council to support this. So, Ms. Williams, would you like a little further explanation?
Yes, certainly, Mayor Clark. Just with respect to the motion being not debatable, in fact, it is debatable, but the debate should be limited to the merits of the reconsideration only.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. We can't discuss the merit or non-merit as we see it of the actual motion. That this would allow us to. We have to pass this to consider that, so we can discuss whether you want to allow this to go forward or not. But that's a very limited conversation. So to be carried by 2/3 of members of council, that the council consider resolution number 2019-25 regarding grant funding to Information Orillia from the special meeting of council held on February 4th, 2019. Councillor Iman.
Mayor Clark, seeking clarification from staff. Debate on the reconsideration, the report that follows the Councillor Lauer's report indicates what might happen if we were to reconsider. Can we debate that at this point in time or seek clarification around that report and the intention, as opposed to just because in effect that's debating this motion. So I'm just curious as to where I can and can't go on this.
Ms. Williams, I believe from the chair I know the answer, but I'll ask you to answer that.
Certainly, Mayor Clark. It is entirely up to you as the chair on sort of where that line is drawn. We do say that the debate should be limited to the merits of the reconsideration, and so certainly the debate should be limited. But I will leave that up to your judgment on sort of where you'll draw the line on that.
My belief is, Councillor Eamon, that the merits of the potential following resolution cannot be debated. So if you've got a way of wording that without doing that, I'm willing to entertain that.
Mayor Clark, my support for this would be contingent on my sense of a small amendment that might be made to Councillor Lauer's direction. That amendment would not alter the intention to release funds today, but would in fact impose upon OCAN to appear before council to confirm, not Information Orillia, but OCAN to come to council and reconfirm why they exist and under what auspices they exist and what authority they have to continue to operate.
Thank you. I will say I'm guessing that sounds like a material discussion on the proposed motion, which potentially with an amendment. So I think I'll limit that to that if that's okay. But I think you snuck your point in there. Any further discussion on the motion to reconsider? Is there a mover and seconder to moved by Councillor Lauer, seconded by Councillor Heen? Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried.
Certainly, Mayor Clark, if it would be beneficial to council, I can certainly walk you through each step of the process as we go along. So council just passed a reconsideration motion to reconsider resolution number 2019-25. That is the motion that is now before you on your screen. So this is the motion, we call it the all-encompassing motion from the budget deliberations that occurred earlier this year. And so the first step here is to get this on the floor, and we'll have to amend it to pull the Information Orillia clause.
All encapsulating motion which captured this clause originally. So, if I understand it correctly, as you just articulated, I need a mover and a seconder for this, and then this needs to pass, it needs to be amended. Sorry, Ms. Mills, I'm going to explain that one more time.
I'm happy to, Mayor Clark. And so we'll just ask for a mover and a seconder to get this motion on the floor. And at that time, we have an amendment prepared to this motion to pull, I believe it is clause 146, which is the Information Orillia clause.
Indeed, thank you. So we passed the motion to reconsider. That's allowing us to discuss this. Is there a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Follis, seconded by Councillor Heen. So I'll wait for that to hit the desk. So moved by Councillor Follis and seconded by Councillor Heen. That report number 2019-2 of Budget Committee now before Council be adopted with the exception of clauses 61, 110, 144, 148, 149, 154, 158, 159, 208, 211, 273, 274, 285, 290, 294, 296, and 304, which shall be introduced separately. Is there somebody that is considering an amendment to this motion? Councillor Lauer, it appears as though you may want to do that.
So yes, okay, at this particular time, I wish to amend that motion to separate out clause 144.
And you got a seconder and Councillor...
and add 146. Sorry.
Okay, so the amendment is just to pull that clause, correct, Ms. Williams, at the moment?
Yes, Mayor Clark. This is really a housekeeping step that we must undertake for our record-keeping purposes. And so the debate, really, there's no debate on this motion. We're just pulling it to isolate that Information Orillia clause, as the reconsideration motion was very specifically worded to limit the reconsideration to Information Orillia.
Thank you. And indeed, and the astute councillors Lauer and Iman certainly understood that. Moved by Councillor Lauer, seconded by Councillor Iman, that the motion now before council be amended to add the following after 144, 146. So it's 144 colon 146. So that allows us, Ms. Williams, just speak to the material direction that allows us to take on that, please.
Certainly, Mayor Clark. So this amendment is pulling the information Orillia clause, which is 146. So if this amendment is successful, council will then debate on the motion as amended. And if that carries, we will introduce finally clause 146, which is the information Orillia report. It's
a long and circuitous route, but I think we're getting there. Okay, so the amendment here, which materially allows us to pull the issue around information Orillia and have that discussion if this passes. So is there any further discussion on this amendment to the main motion? I will now call the question. All in favor? That has passed. Ms. Williams, is there something else coming forward?
Through you, Mayor Clark. We'll just need to call the question on the motion as amended, and then we will have another motion presented to council.
So now back to what I could describe as the main motion. Moved by Councillor Falla, seconded by Councillor Heen. Report number 29-2 of Budget Committee now before council be adopted with the exception of clauses 61, 110, 144, 148, 149, 154, 158, 159, 208, 211, 273, 274, 285, 290, 194, 296, and 304, which shall be introduced separately. This motion as amended, which was just passed. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Lauer, is there something that you wish to bring to the attention of this chamber?
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and thank you to all my colleagues for your patience working through the mechanics of this amendment. What we're trying to do here is originally we had a request by Information Orillia for $35,000, and we had attached a condition on it that the funding be contingent on Information Orillia signing an agreement with the Orillia Community Action Network, otherwise known as OCAN, and Sunshine Initiative to support their services. So what we were looking for was some confirmation that we were providing the administrative services to those groups. We did receive a letter and submitted it from the Sunshine Initiative. However, we have not been able to get any assurance from OCAN. This was actually intended to come forward in June, and then at the very last minute, we did receive contact from representatives of OCAN, and they did ask for a meeting, so therefore we postponed it. We were actually going to do this reconsideration in June, as I say. So we did have a meeting with them, and still, again, in the report, we identified the one problem that nobody's an actual entity to sign, or they didn't feel comfortable doing it. But we did have a fairly positive meeting with OCAN, and thought we might have had something worked out, but in fact, nothing was forthcoming, or nothing has been forthcoming. So I'm assuming that same problem exists, that it's because they're not an entity. Anyway, so what we're asking is that we waive that condition. And allow the remainder of the funds to be given to IO to continue supporting the situation table, which is very active. It meets, I believe, every week on Tuesday, I think it is. Anyway, they continue to be very active and very effective, and IO is supplying the service to that particular function. And so what we're basically saying is just if Council would waive that one condition, we could carry on for the rest of the year and certainly do an evaluation at the end of the year of exactly what kind of arrangement would be appropriate if we were to go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lauer. I presume that you are the mover of this motion. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Campbell. I'll wait for that to hit my desk. I should have done that in the reverse order. Moved by Councillor Lauer, seconded by Councillor Campbell. That clause 146 of Budget Committee, report 2019 now before Council, be adopted. And of course, that encapsulates what you see on the screen before you. Is there any further discussion, questions, or comments? I'll call the question. Oops, sorry. Councillor Iman.
Mayor Clark, this motion that is on the screen includes the condition that I think Councillor Lauer wants to remove. So if we do it,
well, indeed. So, Councillor Lauer, are you suggesting
he wants to amend this?
So we need a. So you're moving the amendment. Do I have a second? So, Mr. Councillor Campbell, were you seconding the amendment? Okay. Were you seconding the second amendment? Thank you, Councillor Iman. All right. Anyway, so I've read the motion, and before I call it, we've got a proposed amendment by Councillor Lauer, and seconded by Councillor Campbell. That the motion now before Council be amended to add the following: with the exception that the following paragraph be removed, and that the funding be contingent on Information Orillia signing an agreement with the Orillia Community Action Network and Sunshine Initiative to support this service. And the following paragraph be inserted. And that funding be contingent on Information Orillia continue to provide administrative support to the Situation Table and the Sunshine Initiative for the remainder of 2019. Discussion? Questions? Comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. I'll go back to the main motion. Councillor Iman.
Mayor Clark, in looking at the motion as it's now written, I don't believe the amendment that I mentioned seeking is pertinent to this motion. I believe that it may be more appropriate for me to introduce an inquiry motion at a later date to seek OCAN appearing before us to reestablish their mandate before this with this council. I just think that we've narrowed this down to a point where that's not relevant to my amendment is not relevant to the way it stands at the moment.
It certainly could have bearing on what happens in the future in budget process. Okay. All right. Thank you. And as I say, anybody like the main motion reread? I shall read it. It's one line. That clause 146 of Budget Committee Report 2019-2 now before Council be adopted. Moved by Councillor Lauer, seconded by Councillor Campbell. Discussion, questions, comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Mayor Clark, there's just one additional motion as a result of all the action that you've just taken, and that is to ensure that Information Orillia receives their funds.
A logical fallout. So we have one more motion that you can see there, which of course was enabled to happen because of the 300 motions we just passed to get here. Is there a mover and a shaker for this? Moved by Councillor Lauer, seconded by Councillor Campbell. That the semi-annual payment installment of $10,000 be released to Information known as IO. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Any further questions, comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. I object. Okay, we have no deputation motions. Hard to do that when you don't have deputations. Ms. Williams, are you aware of anything being pulled from consent agenda?
Not at this time, Mayor Clark.
Thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to enshrine all those stated directions going forward. Is there a mover and a seconder for our consent agenda? Moved by Councillor Ainsworth, seconded by Councillor Heen. For discussion? Okay, I have moved by Councillor Ainsworth, seconded by Councillor Heen that Council adopt the recommendations as set on the consent agenda for the regular meeting of Council this very day, July 18th, 2019. Comment, Councillor Lauer.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Just to mention that we did receive a letter from the Attorney General, and it's an impressive thing to see Doug Downey's name on this letter, given that I think Doug started with the Municipal Council in 2000 and was a member for at least 2 terms. So a neat turn of events.
Councillor Lauer, it's a very good comment. I can only imagine where you're going to be 2 terms from now.
Yeah, if I hang in there.
That's if you hang in there. Councillor Cipolla, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just item 4 on the consent agenda. Exotic animal. Do we know what kind of animals they're going to be exhibiting?
I personally do not know, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I assume it's snakes too, which is something, depends on children, is dangerous, but...
Okay, it sounded like very informal discussion. Councillor Iman. Sometimes discretion is a better part of valor. Okay, any further discussion on the items to be captured by this consent agenda motion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We are into bylaws, and we have one bylaw being added. And Ms. Williams, was that the only amendment to the bylaws?
Mayor Clark, the motion to adopt a portion of the bylaws is on your screen. This motion separates the bylaw number 2019-84, which Councillor Fallis declared a conflict on. Right. It does include the bylaw that was added in the addendum.
Indeed, so thank you for that. So, Councillor Fallis, you're welcome to hang around for this particular bylaw, and we'll excuse you for the next one. Is there a mover and seconder for the bylaws? Councillor Cipolla, mover, seconded by Councillor Iman. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Cipolla, seconded by Councillor Iman, that the following bylaws be enacted. As the legislators you are, 2019-83, a bylaw to adopt Chapter 108 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code, Orillia Sunshine Youth Senate, 2019-85, a bylaw to extend, that is, the expiry date of bylaw number 2016-90, being a temporary use bylaw, Orillia Soldiers Memorial Hospital, 152 West Street West, 152 Mississauga Street West, 219-86, a bylaw to amend Schedule B to bylaw number 2019-7, transfer of certain lands in association with the registration of Stone Ridge Subdivision Phase 9. And 219-87, a bylaw to amend Chapter 458 of the City of Orillia Municipal Code, User Fees, Transit. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Fallis, you are welcome to take a temporary leave. Is there a mover and seconder for the bylaw before us? Moved by Councillor Ian, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth, thank goodness. That the following bylaw be enacted, 2019-84, a bylaw to provide for the levying of an annual tax payable upon a university, college, and a public hospital for the year 2019. This bylaw, I'll read it now that I've started. This bylaw will levy an annual tax payable on Orillia Soldiers Memorial Hospital, Georgia College, Lakehead University, set out in the CIP, which is a counselor information package memo dated June 26, 2019 from the Treasury Department. And the actual bylaw that encapsulates this reads as following. That the following bylaw be enacted, 2019-84 bylaw to provide for the levying of an annual tax payable upon a university college and public hospital for the year 2019. I can read it a fourth time if anybody cares. Me too. I have moved by Councillor Ian, second by Councillor Ainsworth. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Announcements. Sorry, what am I? No, it's announcements. Oh, for confirmed proceedings. Oh, we have one more bylaw. Thank you. The chair is. Moved by Councillor Emond, seconded by Councillor Campbell. This is for a bylaw number 2019-88, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings, all of which we just had, of Council at its meeting held on July 18th, 2019, be enacted. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? Or mention of omissions by the chair? I will call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I will now ask members of council if you have any announcements you wish to make. Councillor Ainsworth.
Through you, Mayor Clark, I just wanted folks to know that this weekend in the beautiful city of Orillia, we have our Scottish Festival. It's going to be a phenomenal weekend. Hopefully the weather is good, and it's a lot of fun for the whole family, so feel free to go down to the park and check it out, as well as invite some friends and family from abroad.
Indeed, thank you. Get your kilt on. I know I will be. Any other announcements? Very well. I will now open the floor for an open public forum. Mr. Greer, you are a relative frequent flyer to the open public forum. The floor is yours if you so desire. You're good to know, I see. Okay. Seeing nobody stampeding their way to the microphone, I will ask for a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Sapola, seconded by Councillor Ainsworth. Everybody have a wonderful night and a safe home. Let's see if there's a consensus on this adjournment. I'll call the question. Motion to adjourn. Carried. Thank you. I'm going home.